Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, and when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions, and best of all, it's totally free. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. We are going to recap Week 6. A lot of, I think, expected results in Week 6. A couple surprises, at least to me, but mostly chalk that covered, and we got a lot of good results nationally. We'll talk about the national top 10, my power rankings. If you like the podcast, make sure to like, follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This one's not on YouTube, but in future episodes, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, leave a review, send me an email. I'll be doing fan engagement again for the picks, for Week 7 picks. That's going to be my pattern, is I'm going to try to get fans involved. So if you have a question or if you have a thought, make sure to let me know, and I will get to your comments, your questions, your thoughts on the picks episodes. As I've been doing, I'm going to just go right into my power rankings as a way to recap what's going on, what's been going on in the conference. And I'm going to start with a bye, a team that was on a bye, that was Indiana. They're still my last place team. They couldn't really earn their way out of that at this point. So they're number 14. They'll have a chance to at least prove themselves a little bit. They have Michigan next week. Number 13, I hate to do this. I hate to say this, but I've got Illinois. I thought Illinois would beat Nebraska at home, and they were not very good. Now, defensively, they played decent. I thought that they picked Harburg off once. I thought their run defense was decent, right? 49 carries, 158 yards. So, Nebraska had over 150 yards, but it was on close to 50 carries. So some of that was kneel downs and whatnot, but still, I thought they played decently. The offense, though, they had 19 carries and 21 yards. Altmaier again threw a pick. I think that's his 8th pick. There are a couple bright spots. I thought Pat Bryant, that guy's a good receiver. He's a very talented receiver. But, man, to only carry the ball 19 times for 21 yards, I know some of that was sack yardage. But this team is even worse than I thought at this point. And, I was back and forth with a couple of Illini fans, Illini Bubba, my guy Luke, who we've been emailing back and forth. You guys were kind of talking about afterwards, kind of just the bad feeling you guys have as fans, and I hate to agree with that, but I don't see much right now from the Illini program that can really salvage the season, at least to this point. There are winnable games down the road, but it was just a rough showing offensively, and that offensive line is rough. That's what's really hard about, I think, the Illini program right now is the offensive line is a disaster. And I think Altmaier shows flashes, but he's turnover prone. The running game is a disaster right now. And they don't have the quarterback to overcome that. And their defense, while it's good, it's not great. It's not elite to be able to carry them through. So I've got Illinois at 13. I debated between them and Minnesota at that spot. I've got Minnesota 12. They got demolished by Michigan, which I don't think, it's not a bad thing to get demolished by Michigan, right? Michigan's a really good football team. And they didn't help themselves. They surprisingly ran the ball at least somewhat decently for a team. Zach Evans had a really good start to the game. They slowed him down later in that game. 117 yards, obviously on 39 carries, so not great. It's not even good. But they had some success early in that game running the ball, but Kaliak-Manis could not throw. He's 5 of 15 for 52 yards. They were not good. They were not effective at all. Michigan was, far and away the better team. 52-10 was the final in that game. I'm not sure what to make of Minnesota. One thing PJ Fleck said after the game was that was the deepest team, I think the best and deepest team that he's faced in his 11 years as a head coach. That might be true, but this might be the worst Minnesota squad that he's had in his tenure. I mean, this is similarly a dumpster fire program right now. I don't know what games they win in the Big Ten. Like maybe Illinois, maybe, but I mean, their offense is non-functional right now, particularly against anybody with a pulse on defense. And that's really concerning if you're a Minnesota fan. And I hate that because I like Minnesota as a program. I think PJ Fleck, I think PJ Fleck has gotten them, I think, as far as he can get them. I'm wondering if you need to make a change at some point. He's been good. He's been very good. But programs like that, sometimes you kind of reach a plateau. I feel like Minnesota maybe has reached a plateau. There's still time, and it is a rebuilding year. I know they lost a lot from the past couple years. But this is a rough spot for Minnesota to be in. So I've got them at 12. Northwestern at 11. And I'll be honest, similarly, I shared this before, 9 through 14 is rough. Actually, I might say 8 through 14 is rough right now. Like the bottom half of this conference, and I hate to say it because I'm a Big Ten guy, is not very good. Northwestern nearly blew a lead to Howard, 23-20. Now, Brendan Sullivan started in this game, so they didn't have their normal starter, but they were outgained by Howard. Now, granted, Howard did most of their damage in the second half, so it wasn't like Northwestern was in control for the majority of this game, right? But it wasn't like Howard had scored their last points to get this game within 3 with 2.5 minutes left. So it coulda, shoulda, woulda. But the reality is Howard has no business being 3 points within Northwestern. They've no business doing that. And yet, not only was Howard 3 points away, they outgained them on offensively. So it's good that they got a win. Northwestern has triple the wins that I thought they would have this season. And to be honest, there's probably a couple more winnable games on their schedule, but I think it's going to be hard for them to do that. I think they got lucky against Minnesota, no offense. And I think it's going to be rough moving forward. David Braun has proven himself as the interim coach. I think he's doing a good job coaching. It's just, again, you're seeing the talent dearth at Northwestern right now. So I've got them at 11. Nebraska at 10. I was saying that the bottom half of this conference is not very good, but I do want to highlight that the Nebraska game, the Nebraska win with Scott Frost as coach, this was a game they lost. They found a way to kind of fumble it away or turn it away with turnovers, something like that. Harburg has not been great, but he has been good enough. And for them to get a win on the road against a Big Ten opponent, I don't care if Illinois is, not the Illinois of years past. I don't care. This was a game Nebraska lost in the past few years. And this is what I've been saying about Matt Rule. Be patient with him because he's starting to right the ship. And you look at Nebraska's schedule, you look at their, what they have coming up. Could they get to bowl eligibility, right? Northwestern, they get a bye week and they have Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa. That's tough, right? Purdue can get you, can sting you. Obviously, Iowa's defense is pretty good. Wisconsin, Maryland, decent teams, but you can at least get Northwestern. I think you can get Michigan State. And I think you can probably get Purdue. Even if they don't get to bowl eligibility, this is progress for the Cornhuskers. I know that sounds bad because you're you think of Nebraska, you think of, years of old, the run in the 90s, and even Bo Pelini and his years of often getting to 9 and 10 wins. But for where they've been, this is a really good job by Matt Rule. To get a win like this on the road, it signals progress. And so I'm very optimistic about the building and rebuilding of this program for Nebraska. I know people will say it's only Illinois. They have not been good. I get that. This is a game you lost in the past. Good job by Matt Rule. Good job by the Cornhuskers. Number 9 is Michigan State. They were on a bye this week. Purdue at 8. They kept it close. They fought, got it down to a 6-point lead in the fourth quarter, but ultimately Iowa's defense was too much in that game. So it's really hard to go to Iowa and win. And against that defense, Hudson Card threw a couple picks. It was tough for them to establish the running game. Part of that was just the quarterback sacks. You take out Hudson Card's statistics, 32 carries for 136 yards. That's pretty good. Devin Mockabee had a decent game, 20 carries, 89 yards, and a touchdown. But it's the picks. That's the game if you think about it. If they don't turn the ball over, Purdue has a shot to win this game. It's that and the big play by Caleb Johnson, who came back in this game, had a big 67-yard touchdown. Again, Purdue had, scores with about 3 minutes left to get this within 6 points, but a little too late. Still, to go on the road, Purdue to go on the road, you watch the film and you think, okay, they could have beat Iowa if they don't make mistakes, right? If they don't make those mistakes. That's the thing moving forward. You've got a tough matchup against Ohio State coming up. Can they maybe exploit some things with the Buckeyes? I don't know. I doubt it. But then you look at the rest of their schedule. Wisconsin and Iowa, they're out of the picture. Now you got Ohio State and you've got Michigan, but you also have Nebraska, Minnesota, Northwestern, Indiana. Again, 4 winnable games. That Nebraska game, I think, is really key because I think the winner of that may have the inside track at bowl eligibility between the two. because they're not. I don't think they're going to beat Ohio State. I don't think they're going to beat Michigan, but I think they can get to 6-6. That game at Nebraska is huge. So, but that's a tough loss for Purdue. It really sets them back, and if they want to go to a bowl game, because just that schedule just does not set up well for them. Number 7, I have Iowa. Iowa, their defense is really good. Their offense stinks. And, Deacon Hill, I think I saw it, he had 110 yards passing in that game. Big 22-yard touchdown reception in the fourth quarter to Eric All. But Deacon Hill was 6 of 21. This is not a good pass defense. But this is, Deacon Hill is the backup quarterback. Luke Lachey is out for the season. A receiver didn't have a catch in this game. This is not a way to win games forward, moving forward. They are currently 5-1, with the one loss being to Penn State. But if you look down the road, you look at their schedule, at Wisconsin next week, that I think Wisconsin wins that. They have a lot of winnable games. Minnesota, Northwestern, Illinois, Nebraska. But that Rutgers game, I'm very curious. I think Rutgers will get them. I really do. I just don't think Iowa is good. And honestly, I would not be surprised if they get stung by one of the other West kind of bottom dwellers right now. Because the reality is, if you can't move the ball efficiently, if you take away the 67-yard touchdown run by Caleb Johnson, they did not run the ball well. I think without that 67-yard run, I think it was around 120 yards on 30-some carries. So you're talking about 4 yards a carry and a completion percentage of less than 33%. It's less than 30%. That's not winning football, and that was against a not great defense. I get that the other teams are not good, but Iowa is playing with fire here. And I get it. Backup quarterback, backup tight end. I get that. But they've got to figure out a way to score. Because otherwise, they're going to get stung by other teams. And I think one of the teams that will get them is Rutgers. And I would not be surprised, despite the fact that all those other teams on their schedule are in the bottom half. If you don't score points, you leave yourself vulnerable. And so Iowa could easily get to 10-2. But also, they could easily be 8-4, and that's their own fault for being offensively inept. I've got Rutgers at 6. This game turned on one of the last plays of the first half. Gavin Wimsatt got the Scarlet Knights down to the end zone, to the 5-yard line, throws a pick on 2nd and goal, becomes a 95-yard interception return for a touchdown. Wisconsin's up 17-0 at that point. Rutgers is good enough to compete. We saw it against Michigan, and we saw it against Wisconsin. But the reality is, Rutgers has to play good football. They cannot make silly mistakes and bad errors and win games. They're not good enough yet to do that. And so to go on the road against Wisconsin, they did a lot of things right. They got a fumble recovery at their own 5-yard line. So that was really good on them. Even though they didn't cash it in, they were able to hold them in the red zone. That was really great. But then they march down the field, 2-minute drill. Gavin Wimsatt did a great job leading that drive, just couldn't finish it off. And instead of it being 10-7 or at the very least 10-3, it's 17-0. And now all of a sudden it's over. Because Rutgers does not have the offensive firepower Now, I think Rutgers is more competent than Iowa is right now because they have some offensive identity. And I think Wimsatt is a good runner. He adds some dynamicism to that offense. They don't have the infrastructure yet. They've been building, but the reality is they don't have the type of offensive personnel to come from 17-0 down. That's what we saw against Michigan. It's what we saw against Wisconsin. So that being said, I think Rutgers is the sixth best team in the conference because of their defense. That defense played really well against, I think, a good Wisconsin offense. And again, I'll say this. I keep banging this drum. I think Rutgers gets bowl eligible. I think they at least beat Michigan State and Indiana. And I think it's possible they could get Iowa and Maryland. Like I think the floor most likely is 6-6. Now, I think Michigan State has enough talent to upset, and I think Indiana on a good day defensively can make things hard. So if they don't get to 6-6, I'm sorry, Rutgers fans. But I think there's certainly room there to say, hey, if all goes well, 6-6 should be the floor for this team, which, again, I think would be a major accomplishment for Greg Schiano and the Scarlet Knights. Number 5, I have Maryland. This is less about Maryland losing to Ohio State and more about Wisconsin. But Maryland, I mean, I thought they had Ohio State in a lot of trouble. And similar to, I think, Rutgers with Wisconsin, I think if Tagovailoa doesn't throw a pick six in the second quarter, I think that game is different in a lot of ways because then all the momentum, Ohio State got a lot of momentum back from that and from, I think, the mismanaged 2-minute drill or 30-second drill, I should say, where Maryland probably could have kicked a field goal and instead they threw it over the middle and then the clock ran out. That being said, they've got, I think, maybe the most dynamic offense in the conference right now, like at least the most in tune offense. I think Ryan Hemby had some good moments. They've got that Antoine Littleton, had some good moments. Obviously Tagovailoa is an effective runner. Their receiving core is really good. Ty Felton, Corey Dykes, Caden Prather, Deshaun Jones. That's a really, really effective receiving core. It's just I think they played a really good defense. Particularly, I think the secondary is really good. I think those safeties for Ohio State are really good, and they're going to challenge people. But I think Maryland's a pretty effective offense, and I think they're going to give teams trouble, including Penn State and Michigan. The offensive line, I think, is weaker. I think that's what really holds them back from the big three. But I do think Maryland is, I think they're a dangerous out, and I think Michigan and Penn State need to watch out for them. So I got Maryland at 5, Wisconsin at 4. I think they're starting to figure out who they are. Right? They're not going to be the air raid team yet, but I think you see Tanner Mordecai, he's able to use his legs a bit. They're feeding Braylon Allen, who's a beast. They've kind of got a second back who's really starting to come alive. He's their former fullback. And the defense is playing well. That combined with the fact that if you look at that Washington State loss, I know Washington State just lost to UCLA, but it's still, Washington State's a really good team. And Wisconsin had to go on the road and they lost, and they didn't lose big. I think Wisconsin is better than people are giving them credit for. I think they should be ranked. Quite honestly, I think Wisconsin and Maryland both should be ranked. But I digress. Wisconsin at 4, Penn State at 3. They had a bye this week. They also have a bye next week because they play UMass, which I don't know how I feel about that as an Ohio State fan because they're getting 2 bye weeks before arguably the biggest game in the Big Ten, at least until Penn State plays Michigan. So kudos to the Nittany Lions for getting a couple weeks off. But I got Penn State at 3. I've got Ohio State at 2. I know I've talked a lot about you got to prove it, and Ohio State still has the best win out of anybody in the Big Ten. But that win against Notre Dame does not look as good, especially with them getting beat down by Louisville. Louisville I think is a good team. I don't think they're a great team. And I think part of it, is Notre Dame is wearing down. But they have not been able to run the ball well the past couple weeks. I mean, Ohio State was getting just pummeled by Notre Dame. And you saw moments of it against Maryland, where Maryland was able to run the ball down their throats pretty effectively in the first half. They got some of it fixed up. But, I mean, Ohio State sleptwalked a bit in the first half. And some of the same struggles that they've had for the past couple years, bad play calling, predictable play calling. I think the defense is better, but I don't think it's as good as Michigan's or Penn State's. And quite frankly, I think this offensive line is mediocre at best at this point. And if that does not change, this is a team that will lose to Penn State and Michigan. And if I don't see any improvement from Ohio State, I will pick Penn State over Ohio State. I'm already leaning in that direction. So I've got Ohio State 2, bordering on dropping them to 3. I want to see how both teams do next week. I got Michigan at 1. I know Michigan hasn't played anybody, but there is something about them just dominating their competition. I mean, they absolutely dominated Minnesota. They couldn't do anything in the pass game. They really did hold them in the run game for the most part. So, I mean, I thought Michigan played well. They've been dominant every week. And there's something suffocating about that. I don't have them as my number 1 overall team yet, but I think as the season progresses, I think there's a strong case to be made for them being the number 1 team in the country. Let me do national top 10 real quick. I've got Oregon at 10, Washington at 9, Bama at 8. Don't look now. Bama got through Texas A&M, and I know people are like, well, Texas A&M's not that good. They went to Texas A&M and won that game when everybody thought they were going to get upset. This is what they do. I hate to say it because I don't want it to happen, but this is what they do, particularly when they don't have all-world offensive personnel. Just look at 2015. Look at 2011. Look at 2009. This is what they do. Strong running game, good defense, and they smother teams. Texas at number 7. It's respectable to lose by 4. I've got them at 7. Florida State at 6. Man, their wins. Clemson is not a good football team. LSU is not a good football team. I get that they beat both those teams. I don't care. Like, Florida State has real holes. And, we saw it again. They struggled with Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's not a good football team. So I got them at 6. Penn State at 5. I know I dropped them down. I'll explain in a minute why. Number 4, I have Ohio State. Again, the strength of their wins. Like, beating Maryland is a good win. And they beat them by 20. And I think they beat them by 20 despite the fact that Ohio State's offense played like a D- game in the first half. They got better in the second half, but it's a good win. It's a strong win. 20 point. They showed resiliency. So I've got them at 4. Georgia at 3. I had them at 9 last week. And the reason why I have them at 3 now is because they actually beat a team with a pulse and they beat the tar out of them. That's what I wanted to see. Georgia had been struggling against bad teams. They were sleepwalking against teams like UAB. They were sleepwalking against teams like South Carolina. They did not play well against who's the team that they played last week? Auburn, at Auburn. And so I'm not going to reward them for looking like, an uninterested team for the first 5 weeks. They were interested this week, and I moved them up. Will they keep doing it? Are there teams that can take advantage of their sloppy play if they come out sloppy again? I don't know. The East is not good. Florida's not good. Missouri's okay. I think Missouri could sting them. Tennessee's got some guys, but I don't think Tennessee. Honestly, I think Georgia's going to cruise into the SEC championship game. So I've got Georgia at 3. They actually looked like a legit team after that Kentucky game. Michigan at 2, and my number 1 team vaulting into my top 10 into the number 1 spot is Oklahoma. Great win, in a neutral site against Texas. And again, a big part of this is the fact that they beat a really good team in a neutral site. And it was a great game, really competitive game, obviously. It'll probably change as the season goes on because more resumes will get built. And I'm not completely sold that Oklahoma is really, really great. I wasn't honestly that sold that Texas was really, really great. But compared to everybody else, who they've played and what they've proven, I don't feel like I can put Michigan or Georgia above Oklahoma. Like, I just don't think I can. Like, neither of them have a type of win that Oklahoma does. And while Ohio State has a better win than both of those teams, and Florida State has a couple of wins that are decent, Ohio State has not looked complete, right? Florida State has not looked complete. Oklahoma has looked complete. Michigan has looked complete. Georgia has looked complete. And so that's why how I'm ranking those teams right now. But obviously it can change. One more note, and then I'm gonna sign off here. I want to see USC play Notre Dame. Now I think Notre Dame is worn out. I think that stretch of Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, USC might be one of the hardest stretches of anybody of any schedule in the last 10 years. Like, that's a legit schedule. And that's really hard to get up week in and week out. And so they might just be taxed. But also, I think USC's in a lot of trouble this week because their defense stinks. They should have lost to Arizona last week or on Saturday night. They got saved by that dumb overtime rule, and it's so dumb. I hate the overtime rule. But if USC beats Notre Dame, I will probably put them in the top 10. But right now, I can't put them over Texas. I can't put them over Alabama. I know they're one-loss teams, but I think if Texas played USC today, I think Texas beats them by 3 touchdowns. I think if Bama plays them today, they win by 4. I think they win by 3 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns. USC's not good. They have a really good quarterback. They have some really good skill position players. Their defense stinks. And it's going to bite them. It's going to bite them at least, I think, twice, if not more. So I can't put USC. And USC hasn't beaten anybody. Besides, Colorado notwithstanding, they haven't beaten anybody. So that's my top 10 and my power rankings. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. Send me your thoughts, your reviews, your emails. Would love to get some more fan interaction for this week's podcast. This has been the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. Zach Guggenheim signing off. Take care. God bless.